Welcome to Season 2 of the Wood Podcast. This is a lo-fi skateboard podcast where we talk about where we're from, our beginnings, our boards, our back problems, and our homies. We love the pros, but there's also a whole world of B-team celebrities, ramp builders, local rippers, little groms, and all the people you don't get to hear about on a normal basis. And who knows, you might actually hear a pro or two on here one day. But for now, enjoy the deep cuts. Brought to you by Eureka Street Creative, The Skate Gym, Hellsick, and Beware Skateboards. Welcome to another edition of the Wood Podcast, and I am John Miller, and your lovely host for this show. This show is all about the B team, the guys with the back problems, the guys hanging out on the deck of the ramp, and reminiscing about the old days, and us lifelong skaters who are just in it for the stoke and not for the sponsors and all that stuff. There's other podcasts for the pros, but this one's for the schmoes.
This is not the the pro talk.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm at the Banger in the Hangar, and we have this crazy studio set up in a container here, and there's a vert ramp right on the other side of this wall over here. And I'm running here to Hubba. Hello. And I just said, hey man, you're like a perfect person to jump in and learn a little bit about your story. I've seen you skate, absolutely rip. So there's no B team about this guy right here.
Still doing it.
Hubba.
Yeah.
Hey man, tell me a little bit about your first experience on a skateboard.
Man, it's been a long time since I thought about this, but it all started. I grew up really fortunate in a neighborhood that was completely covered in skating. I grew up in Garland, Texas, and at that time, I think I was 12 at the time, and I had I can back up a little bit further. My first experience of skateboarding was I had a cousin who skated in the 70s. Okay. And he came into town, and my mother took him over to this old concrete skate park in Dallas called Wizard. And it was at the time when Wizard was closed. And my cousin had one of those old, I guess it was like a Sims board that had the 4 trucks on it. He had one of those. And
4 trucks on a Sims board?
Yeah, it had 4 trucks on it. So it was a big old fat wide board from the 70s, and it had 4 sets of trucks on it.
So like a dually board.
Yeah, basically. I guess the premise behind it was really good for carving around the bowls and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, he jumped over the fence, and I jumped over the fence because this is when Wizard was closed. Okay. And then he rode around into the bowls, and then he let me ride his skateboard a little bit, and I cruised around with that. And then my mother got really nervous, and she's like, "We got to go." And so we both humped back over the fence and left. And that was like my first real experience of skating. And then years later, I had a friend of mine in school that skated and talked me into getting a board. Yeah. And so I actually played soccer with him too on the soccer team. And so he got a board and I got a board, and I had moved from the school I was going to the same school that he was going to, and we would like ride down the alley on our skateboards, and they would go down to the bottom of this street where our school was at. And there was like a loading dock, and we would skate and jump off this loading dock and do all that kind of crap.
Acid drops.
Yeah, all kinds of crap like that. I thought he was the coolest kid because he would ride and jump off the loading dock. And he was like the first person I saw. I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. And then, like I said, I was fortunate to grow up in a neighborhood that had just tons of skating. We had tons of mini ramps. And the first ramp I ever skated in my neighborhood was this guy named Dale Sharp had this little blue mini ramp called the Smurf ramp. And go over there. We were too intimidated to skate with all the kids that would ride that. I think Dale was like in high school.
How tall was it?
I think it was 4 foot.
Oh, okay.
I think it was 4 foot, maybe like 12 foot wide or something like that. But that was the first time. And that same kid that I was talking about, he and I went over there early one morning, like on a Sunday or something like that, when none of the big kids were riding the ramp. We decided, like, this is our chance to ride the ramp, so we're going to do it. And we skated for a little bit. He dropped in and he fell and his board shot out. And it was right next to the garage. And the board went through one of the little pane glass windows and went into Dale's garage. And we like freaked out and ran and just took off and left this board there. Then he had to go back like a couple of days later and like knock on his door and be like, hey, was there like a skateboard in your garage? He gave him his board back. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was the neighborhood I grew up in. I was really lucky. There's tons of ramps, tons of people that skated, and yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Well, tell me a little bit about Wizard. Was that like a concrete park? Or?
It was a concrete park that I think was built in the 70s, and I don't know how long it was open, but I heard of other people skating it. Yeah. When I got older and was skating, people would always like tell me about it. Yeah. I didn't realize that was Wizard until many years later, of like hearing people talk about the concrete parks that were there in Dallas, and that was the only one that I ever remember. Okay. So I think I remember like Dan Wilkes talking about it and some other people that actually rode that park back then. But
okay, and that was in the early '80s. Whenever you,
man, I don't even know because I was a lot younger then. I started skating when I was like 12.
And what about you? What year was that?
I have vague memories of that. Yeah. But I didn't, like I said, I didn't realize it was Wizard until many years later. I just remembered it was like a concrete park and it was closed at the time. I think it was already set to be.
Oh, so they were like bombing it basically. Like,
we were like, I was already, breaking the law at that age because we were jumping over like a construction fence to get inside of it. So,
man,
the reason why I knew it was Wizard is because I think Wizard was on this road it was in Garland, basically. It was where that spot was. So that's where we were in our neighborhood. And I think that was the only one that was around.
Yeah. Oh, cool, man. So, like your first skateboard, right? So I kind of grade them between like, your first board and then the first pro model. So your first board, what was that one? Or did you just jump straight to a pro model?
No, there was a guy named Paul in my neighborhood who knew that I wanted a skateboard. So he had like some Nash board that he sold to me for like $25. And then I think the next Christmas or whatever, my parents bought me a Mike McGill. Oh. I got a McGill. Yeah. So that was like, I think my first real board that I really rode until it was done was that McGill board. Because I didn't ride that. I think that Nash board that I had, I left it outside and it got all rained and the wheels wouldn't spin.
Oh, man. Those things were tanks.
Like the early days when you just kind of like, you're still kind of skating, not really like skating all the time. Like it was just a device to go back and forth from school at that point.
Yeah. Was it the Executioner? Or?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was the Executioner. But I don't even remember. I had that for such a short amount of time period. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. It's kind of a blur.
Yeah. I think it was like pink.
The fluorescent pink one,
like a hot pink or something
with
like
the lappers and copers.
It was an 80s board, basically.
Yeah. And then you had the Mike McGill. Do you remember any of the other accessories on there, like the trucks and wheels?
I had trackers.
Okay.
I don't remember what the wheels were, but it was a blue Mike McGill, and it had trackers, and that's all I can remember.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not like one of those people who still has the original board they rode.
Not like a gear guy.
No, I didn't keep a lot of that stuff. So I wish I would have though.
You see what those are going for nowadays?
I know some of those boards.
Yeah. So, okay, as a kid, you had the Mike McGill, and did you have like a little crew that you would hook up with and roll around the neighborhood with, or?
Yeah, so in the same neighborhood, I had a real good friend of mine that he was like the first guy I knew that had like a launch ramp in his neighborhood. Yeah. And they all went to the same school as me. So this guy, Marshall, my buddy, Eric Bellinger, another guy named Luciano Moore, and then his brother, Arthur Moore, and a whole big group of people that from the high school that all skated back then, but I think most of them don't skate anymore.
Sure, yeah, they get cars and they just
right, yeah, it's a typical thing that draws you away from it.
So you hit up the Smurf ramp, but you're talking about high school now. Did you move on to any other ramps or spots around there that really stand out to you?
So that guy Eric Bellinger really kind of opened up my world of skating. Like I said, he had that launch ramp. I didn't really know him, but I knew who he was. So I decided to wake up one morning and renegade that thing like we did the Smurf ramp, where I was like, I'll go in the morning. And because he was a couple of years older than I was, and I was like, I'm going to go and nobody's there, because at that age, I was always kind of intimidated to skate around a group of people. So I would just, kind of run off and try to hit stuff and nobody was there. So I wake up early Saturday morning. And he's the whole reason why I skated Vert and all this stuff, because I walked from one neighborhood over to the other to go skate his launch ramp. And up the street was a guy named Kurt. And he's the only guy that Eric knew that had a car. Yeah. And he would, drive around. He skated too, so he would take them skating. So I show up at his house, and I'm skating his launch ramp, and he walks out, and he asks who I was, and then he's like, "What are you doing today?" And I go, "Well, I'm skating this, just hanging out at your house." And he goes inside, and he comes back out, and he goes, "Hey, do you want to go skate Bachman Lake today?" And I said, I'd heard of it because, as like people in the neighborhood, we all heard about this big blue vert ramp that people would go skate in that area. I didn't even know at the time. I didn't even know where Bachman Lake was.
Okay,
I just knew there was a big there's a big vert ramp there, and he asked me if I wanted to go skate it. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So like his parents got to call my parents, and they're doing the whole deal. His dad's going to drive us out there, and it was way off of like Northwest Highway, basically Northwest Highway and Harry Hines.
Okay.
Which back then still pretty much is, but back then it was a pretty rough neighborhood. Okay. It was Harry Hines is the like district where a lot of prostitution was going on there, so it was like on the street kind of stuff. And I remember telling my parents, they were asking where it was, but since I was going with a friend I went to school with, parents, they were like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." So we go, and this is like this was like everything. The first day I ever go out there is the first time I saw all these like, heavy hitters, skaters skate this vert ramp. So the first day I go, it's like Art Steve Godoy. It's when I saw Mike Crum for the first time, and this guy, Pat Sherman, Danny Hollenbeck, and I don't think Jeff Phillips was there that first day, but there were a ton of other like incredible skaters. And I remember that day watching all those people skate. I didn't skate the ramp at all because I was like way too intimidated, but I was like, I want to fucking do that shit.
Wow.
Like it was very influential as far as like what I wanted to do from there on out. Yeah. And that's pretty much all we did. And so that day probably started everything as far as like skating vert, skating ramps, and all that stuff. Like that. It was cool to go see that for the first time, but it was like I was going to this for the first time, but in a completely different environment. It was just 80s skate scene. So that's pretty cool. I've thought about that multiple times about that day, and just like if that day probably happened in a different way or it didn't happen at all, I probably wouldn't have gone down the path that I went down.
Sure, yeah. So it was all tied into Eric Bellinger and going to Bachman Lake. Huh?
Yeah, with his family. And so like every weekend it was like either my parents or his parents, or until he got a driver's license.
Oh, okay.
They were taking us back and forth. And the first time my parents took me out there, they were like, what the fuck? Because Bachman Lake was in a parking lot between a club. It was a club called RJ's on the lake. And it was behind I think it was a Del Taco back then.
Okay.
I remember it was like a taco place, like a Taco Bell. And it was on a parking lot on a lake. And then that lake on Saturdays and Sundays was like a big popular hangout. So people would drive around the lake, they'd cruise, and there was just tons of people hanging out, barbecuing, but it was like a big party on Saturdays and Sundays. Yeah. And it was right across from Dallas Love Field, and the planes would fly right over the middle of the vert ramp. Yeah. So occasionally, you could just get freaked out because the planes are loud as shit and they fly over it. But
right when you drop in,
that place was a crazy environment, man. Yeah. It was a weird place.
That just like makes me think about like a mom and dad of like a preteen or early adolescent child.
taking their kids out to vert ramps every weekend. Like, what do you think was going through your
especially back then?
minds?
Because I mean, really, like you look at it, it was like it's a fucking parking lot on a lake.
Yeah.
And the first time my parents took me there, I remember my dad looking around and going, "Okay, this is where you've been. This is where you've been going."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is where we've been going. But even then, back then, my parents were pretty cool. They would drive me over to some guy's ramp. Like the neighborhood I grew up in had tons of mini ramps.
Yeah.
I had a mini ramp in my yard, but there were people everywhere. So they were always like driving me someplace to drop me off at some stranger's house, and just go hang out in people's backyards and skate mini ramps.
That's the difference between our generation and like the millennials and Gen Z now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, eventually I had Jeff Phillips skate park in Dallas, but there was no skate park. It was just a fiberglass ramp in a parking lot on a lake, and just random shit like that.
Okay, so did your kind of skate posse change once you started skating vert?
No, it was all the same people
all the
that
same
I rode with in high school all the way through. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like vert skaters through and through.
All the people that I hung out with, that I skated with in high school, they all skated vert.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all we wanted to do back then.
Yeah, it's just straight up vert because that's what you saw everywhere in the magazines and everything.
Yeah, it was the 80s, man.
Yeah. Like Nodus Compass was starting to bring in street
Vert was
skating.
king when I started, so for sure.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you dropped in on vert?
Like something really big that made your butt pucker, just like.
So there was a guy named Greg Hawker-Smith who owned a 12-foot wide, I think it was 10-foot tall vert ramp in our neighborhood in Garland, and it was steel. And that was the first metal ramp I ever skated. And it's funny that ramp was metal because metal ended up being my favorite surface to skate.
Okay.
Because it's fast and it's great to skate. It's a great surface to skate on. But I dropped in. It took me like 300 tries. It was super sketchy. I remember like my foot doing the whole foot shaking thing, trying to put it on the board, and everyone's giving you advice, and you're just like, you fall. I think I fell like 10 times. And then, so I did drop in that day, but none of my friends were there to witness it.
Oh, shoot.
So if none of the friends were there to witness it, it didn't happen. So the second time I go back with my friends that I skated with, we would, I'm there, and so everybody immediately is like, "You're dropping in, right? You said you dropped in. You're trying to drop in." And my buddy Eric could kick turn back and forth and do backside airs over coping, but didn't drop in.
What?
He didn't drop in.
Okay.
He could do all kinds of stuff without
But he was
actually
scared to drop
dropping
in before. But
not that he was scared. I think he could drop in. He just preferred to do it. He would just kick turn back and forth, and he did good backside airs. He just didn't drop into it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get there, and the second time I'm trying to drop in on a vert ramp, I drop in and I compound fracture my fucking arm.
Oh man.
And it was bad. It was a bad break, and I was doing the whole, like, while I was in shock, I was like, I'm never skating again.
Yeah.
That whole deal. And then I have pictures of me and my friend Chris catamaraning with I had a cast on this arm all the way up to my armpit.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of us catamaraning down a hill like the next day. The next day I had one of those ones with a split where they had to the swelling had to split the cast, so they didn't want it to swell up too bad. So then they put it on permanent cast. But I was skating the fucking thing. So I was in love.
Yeah. Taking unnecessary risks.
Taking unnecessary risks, but shit, I was like 12.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the perfect age too, because you're pretty fearless at that point.
Yeah.
And you would go through breaking an arm or something like that and still get back on it.
Still do it.
Whatever,
I unfortunately never really broke any.
I broke my nose by slamming it into a ditch, but other than that,
I broke a couple of things.
Yeah.
So as far as like your top 3 pro skater influences as a kid,
I can't boil it down to 3.
Really? Okay.
There's
All right. So who were the ones that
many
influenced you?
like
did you pay attention to a lot of magazines and videos? Or
Okay. All right.
Yeah, like I mean, there's like the obvious people, but then there's like all the people I grew up with. Like Texas was full of skaters. So I mean, I like so many different people for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Like just because of the way they skated. Like nobody skated like Craig Johnson.
Yeah.
Nobody skated like Crumb. No, you know, like it's one of the things I always thought was pretty cool about all the Texas skaters back then is everybody was pretty fucking unique.
Yeah.
In the way they did it. Like there was a guy, his name was Howie, that used to skate in Dallas who was deaf. And Howie would do these huge airs. Super fast, flowy, like awesome skater to watch skate. You know, like he was one of my favorite skaters. You know.
Yeah.
And all the people that I grew up with and going back and forth between Houston and Austin and Dallas, man, there's so many of them. It's hard for me to like compile them all together into like a top 10 list because they're just all different.
Well, you were fortunate to grow up with some really advanced skaters, you know, like
it was a crazy scene. Like I was telling about Bachman Lake and the blue ramp is back then. I mean, that ramp was, you know, lo and behold, years later, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But the ramp was kind of it was kind of by the time I started skating, it was already pretty aging.
Okay.
And that ramp had because it was fiberglass and there was no support on it. The sections would kind of cave in.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of created the surface that was like this.
Oh man, yeah.
And it would get really, really slick. But I mean, the people who skated it, you know, Jeff Phillips and Dan Wilkes and Crum and Pat Sherman and Dane Hollenbeck and all the other people that's what we learned how to skate on. And I think it made everybody better, but everybody kind of developed like a completely unique style because I think half of the time you're trying to get used to that ramp. Like Mark Roach, like people like that are just like all different skaters.
Just like compensating.
Yeah,
for all
and
the
everybody
weird
had like a
things about
different
it.
way of approaching, especially that ramp. Everybody
Yeah.
had a different way of approaching that ramp.
So, like, did you go down and skate the Hurricane ramp at all?
Well, we
Grove,
would,
and then,
we would, but that wasn't until like a little bit later. You know, like before we were really getting into it, and like really traveling around and going back and forth. I probably went to Houston like first time like I was probably like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
We would go down for like contests and stuff, and so that's how I kind of. Because I lived in Dallas and I moved to Houston after I was done with high school to go to college, and then I moved to Austin. So I kind of, traveled around Texas enough to where I just knew a lot of people.
Did you ever go down like the sponsorship route and all that stuff?
A little bit here and there.
Contests.
Yeah, like a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
You know, I had, I don't think I really had any kind of like definitive sponsors, but I always had some
Like
kind
flow.
of connection. Yeah. I would get stuff.
I mean, you were skating with all the right people for it.
Sure. There was always somebody opening up a box of skateboards somewhere around me. Plus, we had Zorlak here. Go down to the warehouse, and Dana Buck would be there, and we'd get boards from there. And my friend, I had a friend that was sponsored because my buddy Eric was sponsored by Zorlak, and you know, Crum and everybody there were boards around. There were always boards to be had. So.
Yeah. What about nowadays? Do you participate in any type of formal, skateboard sponsorship or anything like that?
Just the Cockfight stuff.
Yeah.
Still have.
Yeah, you have the Cockfight Pro model.
I had the board on that for a little bit. I still have.
I love Cockfight boards, man.
Yeah. Good wood.
Good wood, good
wood.
boards. Yeah, good people behind it, man. So
the runs are far and few between, but whenever I get a chance to get a run, I get a board out of it.
Yeah, that's rad. Yeah, Michael Neiman's rad.
Yeah.
He found me having a concussion in an Easy 7 a couple of years ago.
Really? Oh, that's an easy place to get knocked out.
Yeah.
That's like I'm infamously known for not enjoying skating that because I always end up getting hurt in that thing.
A lot of people get hurt there, man.
Well, it's all painted, it's all slick and all that stuff.
So speaking of which, like, did you ever cross over into street and vert and like all that type of stuff?
Not street
kinda,
and ditches. Yeah.
Well, like, so we had Phillips's park, right?
Yeah.
There was a little bit of there was kind of like a street course that was really a bowl.
Okay.
There, and then but then Phillips is closed. Actually, in between when Phillips skate park opened and the blue ramp, which actually became the Swatch ramp because they got rid of the blue ramp, Swatch ramp, and then that thing kind of went to the wayside. So Skip and Melvin were done, and I think they got rid of the shop over there.
Yeah.
We would kind of skate street then.
Okay.
So we would whatever we could just to like keep going because there was a time period there where we didn't have a vert ramp. We didn't really have a place to skate in Dallas. So
Yeah, Vert died.
We would come down here because there was always a Vert amp, like, you know, Dennis had the park here, so
Yeah.
there was always something to do here. That's actually how I ended up here going to school, because I would go back and forth between Dallas and here just to come down and skate Vert.
Okay.
Like, just to keep it going.
Yeah.
It was the
yeah.
only place at that time that still had a Vert amp.
Did you ever skate the Shut Up and Skate?
I rode the one in Dallas.
Oh, they
I
had
would
one in
always-
Dallas?
Yeah, they had one in Dallas. So I think they had it like 2 years in a row
Yeah.
in Dallas, and then but it was always here. And then for a couple of years, they had it in both places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I imagine you're pretty stoked about the Banger and the Hangar and a lot of Vert getting a lot of resurgence.
Oh yeah, I live a mile away from here, so
Do you?
yeah, I come
Okay.
over and ride this one every once.
Oh, that's rad, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
it's not as easy as it used to be, but it's still fun.
Yeah, you know, we're all getting a little older. Do you have any like modern skaters that you think stand out to you?
I like to skate with Ben Rayburn.
Yeah.
I like to see him come over here because he'll do some fucking crazy shit with no
Yeah.
pads on. Like he come over here and he'll kill this thing.
Yeah.
I love skating with Adam Wiggins. I usually
Yeah.
skate with him over here, and like, you know, as far as influences go, I mean, it's still kind of the same people for me. Like that, I really like enjoy watch skate whenever we get a chance. Like I always like seeing Crumb skate,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Okay. Do you have any opinion on like formal parks versus street skating and, you know, all that stuff? And
Yeah. The
Well-
formalization of skateboarding, I guess.
We talked a lot about the stuff that I grew up skating,
Yeah.
and I missed that.
Yeah.
So Adam, this weekend he was supposed to shoot. They're going to shoot a concrete bowl in his backyard,
Oh, cool.
and I'm looking forward to that
Yeah.
because, you know, it's just like another backyard scene and
Yeah.
something fun like that.
Yeah.
okay, cool. The whole DIY aspect is what kind of keeps you.
Drawn in.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and this is great too. I mean,
Yeah.
we have good sessions over here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rad, man.
Okay, well, I mean, any words of wisdom you want to pass on to the, you know, anybody listening to this or any younger skaters coming up?
Take care of yourself, for sure. Like take care of your body and all that good stuff, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to still have the physical ability to ride around, and I
Yeah.
think part of that's just because, you know, I did try to like take care of myself
Yeah.
over the years of skating. That's key, because when you get older, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't get any easier. So
Yeah. You still want to be able to skate, not be the guy on the ramp talking about skating because you have a back problem.
right, or it's, I mean, watching skating is fun for
Yeah.
a while, but
Yeah.
you still want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Man, well, thanks so much for jumping on this.
Yeah, this is great.
Giving me a little 2 cents of your life. So,
Yeah.
right on.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Wood Skateboard Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any questions or want to learn more, just go to theskategym.com. Now quit listening here and get out and skate.
That was a lot of noises. Whole family. Yeah. pocket's fun.
Get the G-turn.
Yes. Nice.